Alright, I'm back. So, if anyone's just tuning in, I'm painting a bunch of found objects from the yard. A lot of herbs and flowers and some cut lemons, and hopefully I can put these all together into a sticker sheet eventually, someday down the line. I just made a whole bunch of new cards and stickers, or not stickers, cards and calendars. And all of that gets pretty pricey. Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties. There we go. Yeah, so as I was saying, all that gets really pricey. And these sticker orders, to get the most of it, you have to order quite a few. So when I'm ready, I'll make some more. I still have some of my other ones available, which are the farmers market ones. It's all food related. Let's get a little more detail in these flowers. There's just little bits of these really bright purples, warm purples. But for the most part, they're pretty cool in tone. Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you. It's getting there. All right, gonna add some more detail to this little flower. The darkest part is in the middle. So I'm gonna try to push it a little bit. It's not super dark though, so I have to be careful. And maybe I can add a little more detail to kind of show how this is working. For those that are new, this is how I clean my palette. This is my palette again. Should probably not do this over my painting. But what I do is I take a spray bottle and spray it down. And it's always good to spray your paints. This is how I keep my paint from drying out. And I spray a good amount in there. Like, look at that. There's actually wells of water. Be liberal with that. And you take a cloth or a paper towel. I try to break it up into little pieces so I'm not wasting too much paper towel. And I just wipe it off. And there you go. There's a semi-clean palette. Swapping it back with the painting. Okay. Right now, this is the most opaque white that I've found so far. It's a little more expensive being Holbein, but it's more opaque and good for what I'm about to do, which is I'm gonna be covering some of this and kind of cutting out the silhouette of the shapes using pure white and laying it on pretty thick. So I'm cleaning up the edges of this flower. The silhouette is really important. It needs to be a little more wet. You can also define some of the shadow shapes a little better. And there's a little bit of white peeking in through there. And you can already see the flower like coming out at you a little better. Also gonna go on this side. There we go. See, that helps a lot. And I'm also gonna, still using it pretty thick. Working on the leaf shape. And I'm adding in a lot of this lemon yellow. And I'm gonna try to work on these parts that I did that I told you never to cover. But just adding a little bit of detail and definition. It's a lot easier. So if I'm going over this yellow that's already bright and the only thing underneath this yellow is the white of the paper, so it's easier to keep it cleaner and brighter and richer when I paint on top of it with a yellow. But I'm adding, it's got a little bit of white, but it's mostly this lemon yellow. Once you add too much white, it gets really chalky and washed out. have this yellow. I'm gonna look for it in some other places, like this lemon rind. Add in a little bit. I'm gonna go over here to this lemon rind. And all this has been with my flat brushes. You can use the edges of it to get some of these finer lines. I do have some thinner rounds that I use also. But honestly, they're not out here right now, so I'm not using them. It's not a big deal. Ah, I'm glad you're learning. And I don't know if it's like everything I've learned is kind of on my own, so hopefully I'm not steering you the wrong direction, but I do find a lot of color in the shadows. There's a lot of really interesting colors in this lemon too. A combination of these dull down gray yellows with some cooler yellows. And up here, working a little bit, adding some of these darker, I don't even know if I'd call it yellow, it's more like a green. With like a hint of orange. There we go. I don't really know how long I plan to be running this video for, but I'll just keep it on for as long as I'm working. I appreciate the company. These leaf colors, they've kind of got this soft velvety look to them, which makes for really interesting values. Like they appear really dark, but they're a little bit lighter. And I know it's kind of blending into that shadow, but I think I can define it a little bit by going into the edges of the leaf later. I don't know if any of you paid attention to my stories, but I was thinking about trying to start an online community somehow. I don't really have a direction that I want to go, but I just know that it's kind of frustrating on Instagram to not be able to connect with people more. And it's so easy to get lost comments or things that just seem to go into a black hole I don't mean to ignore people. But when, Instagram doesn't even use real names, it's hard to remember who is who and all that. I don't know if I'm gonna actually go anywhere with it. It sounds really complicated. But I'm still listening to any tips or advice. So on this leaf, there's a very fine edge, which is going to separate it from the shadow. Same with this leaf. But this leaf's edge is a little warmer and a little lighter. And then there's the center part. Things always get quiet when I start to concentrate. Feel free to ask any questions, though. I'm happy to answer. Working around. Going back to this lavender set. And as it gets closer towards the light, it's getting lighter up the stem. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you think so. It's always hard for me to tell while I'm working on a piece if it's looking good or not. I usually have to step away from it completely before I can judge. The worst is when you think it's going well and you're like, yes, this is awesome. And then you step away from it and come back and it's like complete shit. Happens a lot. I'd much rather it be awful, 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 and then, hey, that's not so bad. Just splattered some water on my painting. All right. Do I add white to lighten gouache as opposed with diluting with water? So that's a good question. I do, but at the beginning, if it's a really bright and saturated color like these yellows, that is when I will dilute it and let the white of the paper kind of shine through, because that's the way you're going to get these bright saturated colors. The more white that you add to a color, the more washed out it's going to look. So I really recommend, like when I went to school, they always taught us to use white last. And I kind of follow that rule, not super specifically, but I do think about these things a lot while I'm working, and it helps. And back then I would just do oil painting, so it was even more important to use white last. It's easy, so easy to get really muddy in oil paints. It's okay. Gouache does. The most common complaint with gouache is that it dries darker and it dries lighter. It has best of both worlds. It's actually probably the main reason why people rage quit. But once you kind of figure it out and use it a lot, you learn how to handle it. And you can kind of predict which way it's going to dry. If you follow any of my time lapses, you can see the painting actually dry and see how it changes color. So in general, the whites and light colors are going to dry darker, and the really darks that you want are going to lift up and dry lighter. So the thing that I've found best is to kind of separate them and get your darkest darks down and your lightest lights and keep them separate, and then work your way into the middle. Hopefully that helps. All right, I didn't mean to put that there. Adding some more definition to this poor abandoned lavender. We have all these lavender plants in our yard because it's supposedly drought tolerant. And I think once it's an established plant, it's even more drought tolerant, but we haven't been very good about watering it, and a lot of it has died. I've been keeping some alive though. I'm pushing the darks. So I'm getting these darker bits and really trying to add a thicker paint by now. And hoping that comes through. When I was out picking these, there were a bunch of bees kind of fighting me for them. I see a little bit of a seed in my lemon that I want to put in. Just as a little bit of context with these kinds of things. I'm looking at these flowers that are actually touching the ground, and I want to emphasize that a little more, just to separate a little bit from these shadows. It's a little busy. on this one a little more. The greens on this lavender are very grayed down. And then at the base, it's kind of a yellow, pale yellow. I'm always in awe of nature's palettes. It's so pretty and perfect. I never know what to do with my left hand, so you can still see it in the frame. Kind of just squeezing my paper towel. Oh, thank you. Alright, I'm gonna clean off my palette a little bit. And I'm gonna do the same trick that I did with this one with the white. With the other flowers. My water is pretty gross, actually. If I were smart, I would clean it. But never said I was smart. Okay. Just gonna go over, cut out some of these shapes. I actually moved this guy around, so it's not ideal. I don't really remember. I have thought about it. I'm doing a workshop at Live in Chu Art Studio in Berkeley, February. I don't know the exact date, but if you go to their website, you'll see it. I'm thinking about writing a book. And I'm not sure when that's gonna happen, but it sounds like a fun project. Although I'm kind of turning into one of those people with a lot of ideas and not enough time to follow through with them all, which can be kind of annoying. So I'm gonna try to be a little more realistic. The book? You don't think I should write a book? Or don't be more realistic. Anyway, it would probably just be random thoughts and some techniques. I really don't know. I really want to encourage people to experiment, to paint as much as they can from life, and not so much as use my work directly, but more find inspiration to go out and figure out what they like themselves. Yeah. Well, I do think it's good to have ideas and to always be thinking. But there's a fine line between doing that and never following through. And then also just coming up with a lot of good ideas and being really creative and pushing yourself. Okay. My lemon's already drying up. So this was pretty much pure white. And you can, I don't know if you can see actually. Let me try to get this closer. Right here. You can see that it's already darker. So that's what I mean about trying to preserve the white of the paper. If you're doing these really bright colors, just lay down a light wash and let it shine through. I don't really mind these messy white edges that I'm painting because I do plan on cutting this all out and putting it into Photoshop. I've been really itching to do some kind of designy pieces lately. Thinking of how to translate my artwork into products and things. You know, I know not everyone can afford fine art. It gets pretty pricey. So I want to figure out how to reach more people and make it a little easier for people to help. I need to work on this a little more. Is it verbena? Verbena? Anyone know? Hopefully I can get it reading a little bit better. It's kind of sloppy. I wonder if I moved it. It looks a little bit different. There's a lot going on here. Verbena? Verbena. Oh, okay. So I was saying it completely wrong. Thank you for that. I'm getting a little lost in these leaves. Having a hard time following them. I think this is going up like that. don't be sorry. I love hearing people's thoughts. And I agree, just do it. Get it out there. I like to think that I'm more of a doer than a talker. But I do tend to get really wrapped up in a lot of different stuff at the same time. Oh yes, these are all from the garden. Went out there and hunted around. Some of these blues and greens are a little too artificial looking. So I'm adding a little bit of orange. And I'm really almost exaggerating the values right now. Looking at the silhouette. I totally agree, Shane. It's also good just to make goals. It's easy to get wrapped up in doing the same thing over and over. I want to keep growing and keep learning. And I think teaching is going to help with that process. How am I so confident? Just practice. Well, I also know that I can fix it. I think when people get too precious with their stuff, it's because they feel like they're going to ruin it and have that fear. But you can always fix it. It's not a big deal. And usually if I mess up and do it again, the second time almost always turns out better. So I really just don't care very much. I also really want to be fearless. That's pretty important to me as an artist. Maybe because I'm such a anxious person. Art is the one area where I can be a little fearless and bold. Hunting for my smaller brush. Where is it? I'd like to get some of these smaller details in. So I'll show you my brushes in case you're interested. This is my largest, well, look at my hands, they're so messy. This is my 1-inch flat. They're all watercolor brushes in synthetic. I really like this brush. Utrecht. I'm not really specific on the brands. There's Utrecht or Princeton Aqua Elite. I really like these brushes. This is my 3/4 inch my 1/2" flat. Don't know what brand this one is. I used it so much that I wore out the handle. And then this one is another Aqua Elite 1/4" that I use a lot. And for my bigger paintings, when I'm doing the 18 by 24 or 16 by 20, I use this 1.5" flat. And I do most of the painting with the biggest brushes possible. And then here are my 2 little brushes. I found them. This one is a Creative Mark Kolinsky hair round. I used it so much that the paint started chipping off and peeling, so I had to wrap it in duct tape. But I do like this brush. And this one is from Arteza, and they gave me a bunch of liners. And they're all, they probably came with maybe 10 liners, 10, 15, and I really like them. They hold their point pretty well and are great for small details and signatures. You know, I have an entire class that I made for Skillshare, but I got so frustrated with the editing that I just gave up. And now, I don't even want to look at it because I'm pretty embarrassed at what it was. It was just a simple pear. I've been thinking about, what's it called? Patreon. I'm just a little nervous about starting something and then having that pressure of, having people pay, and then I might go overboard. I tend to go overboard trying to make people happy. Anyone that buys any item from me knows this because I usually try to throw in some freebies. It's hard for me to just to not put my entire heart and soul into everything. So I feel like if I did Patreon, then I'll be too worried about pleasing everyone, and then it's gonna disrupt my work. But I don't know, maybe I just need to try it out, because I would love to get into mentoring and critiquing and helping everyone's work progress. Okay, it's not done. It's not even close. There's a million little things that I want to do, but I have a feeling my second hour is up, and that's when I'm gonna call it quits. I'll just keep going till then, though. But thank you in advance, everyone, for watching. I think I will look into Patreon. I have the account. Verbena. Lemon verbena. I'll try to remember that. Aw. Yeah, I'll post it later. It's been quite a while working on these, but it's fun. Mostly just been blabbering. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Jordan. This is looking a little too sloppy. I want to clean up the leaves. I personally don't like the whole dry brush look. I'm more of a clean, flat lines kind of girl. I'm starting to appreciate it more than I used to. But I want the edges to be clean. I want to fix this shadow under here too. I know it's been a while since I've done one of these. It's just so hard to set up the video. I need to talk to my friend who might help me with some videography. I've been so bad about contacting her. But hopefully down the line I can get a real video for you all. One that isn't with a really weird setup. And I'd like to be able to show you more like the still life subject that I'm working on and my palette, how I mix the paint, all those things which are important. So please let me know also if you're interested in seeing that kind of thing, because if you're not, I'm not going to bother. It's a lot of work. But I really look forward to everyone's feedback. My white is all mixed up. Just gonna put down some fresh white. Usually I'm not too picky about other colors getting into my paint, but since I want it to be pure white, I'm gonna put down some new paint. You gotta kind of water it down and get the right consistency for it to not have that super dry brush look. I just want to clean up these edges. And maybe if I can, these flowers are really tiny. I have another example over here. You can see it up close, but the flowers are so itty bitty. So I can't really get in all those detail. But I'll try to at least suggest it. Using this white, I can also really get some interesting movement and shapes to the leaves. Don't know why I did this curly bit here. It's not how it is. There we go, just cover it up. I really like the shape of this leaf. It's kind of curling under. And if I work on this too much, you'll see the grain that I painted over coming through. So I'm trying to just lay it down thick and leave it so that I'm not reactivating the paint. I have so much stuff on this table that it's really confusing to try to find my place every time. I'm going to try to remember to show you all when I'm done. I almost never paint on my lap like this. But since my subject is almost at the same angle, it works out. Normally, I'd want it to be upright because it tends to get skewed if I'm painting like this. I learned that the hard way after finding a lot of paintings just like look horribly wrong when I lift it up. It might even happen with this one, I'm not sure. Some of my shadows I'm gonna go over again too. They're a little too dark. All right, let's see if I can lighten up these shadows. If the time does go up soon, I will return and show you the still life. Shadows tell a little bit about what's going on with the flowers. You can see these little dots. And it also goes up over here. Hello, Alice. these aren't super accurate. I kind of am losing track of what leaf goes where. But I do want to lighten up these shadows slightly. I am painting white, or kind of a lighter color over it, but I am predicting that it's going to dry darker. I'm going to add some water to my brush and kind of blend it out. Soften up these edges. They get really soft over here. I don't know. I don't think these shadows are gonna quite go into the final stickers if I make them. So I don't know why I'm really bothering, but this one's a tricky one. Okay. Use my Arteza brush. I'm gonna get these last little highlights on the lemon. And I don't want all the highlights to be the same color. You kind of pick your brightest ones and then do a lighter version, more less contrasty one elsewhere. There's actually no highlights on this one. But while we're on highlights, I'm gonna look for the highlights in the other objects as well. Just little bits to punch up the contrast. So the tip of these leaves. Sides of some of these leaves. Let's look at this guy, and I'm not being really picky. I'm kind of using the same color. While I love color, I'm not as particular as you might think.